it has always been clear that Emerson Mnangagwa has been looking for a way to permanently get rid of retired Chiwenga. If any opportunities arises, definitely he would be grateful to get rid of retired General Chiwenga. Of course, ministers as well as also government officials, be it in state institutions or ministers who show their true colors in support of him. It has been easier for him to deal with them, but it must be undertaken and it must be underscored that not all individuals within his government he has managed to remove them, especially those perceived not to be loyal to him. He began some years ago, I think it's 2 years back, to introduce what he called performance contracts, saying he will use those performance contracts to check whether ministers or deputy presidents are working. If they are found to be underperforming, then they will be dismissed based on that performance contract they signed with him. But in terms of really acting on government officials based on meritocracy, Emerson Mnangagwa has been shortcoming in that regard. Greetings and welcome to your lovely channel, the Hlonipani Global News. If you are watching us for the very first time, please do remember to press the red or black subscribe button so that next time when we beam live, you become the very first one to watch. So Emerson Mnangagwa is seeking to legitimize what he calls performance contracts. They haven't been legitimate, especially for the past 2 or so years since they were introduced. And take it into consideration that these contracts were introduced when the rift between him and retired General Chiwenga heightened. This should be perceived as an instrument that would be used specifically to target Chiwenga or to justify his dismissal if he gains courage to undertake that, of which he has been delaying to do so, because that may be consequential, taking into consideration that he is a product of a coup, and there is high probability that Chiwenga may be having some degree of power on Emerson Mnangagwa. So according to state media, actually, that is Herald, today they ran a story, in fact it's Sunday, May, they ran a story saying new bill to make performance contracts legally binding. So before they were not legally binding, but now this bill, that is Amendment Bill number 3 of 2026. You know, we've said it, and also some retired generals have actually characterized that this bill is meant for Chiwenga, and you can see the instruments that are devised. They are actually designed to such a way that they may have numerous fronts to mount against him to fire him. So the story says the government is preparing new legislation that will legally bind ministries, departments, and agencies to meet performance targets in a move aimed at strengthening accountability and accelerate the improvement of service delivery. We know that is not the truth. The proposed government performance and results bill will give legal effect to performance contracts, mandate regular reporting and independent evaluations, and establish enforcement mechanisms for non-performance. Chief Secretary to the President and Cabinet, Dr. Martin Rushwaya, has said the proposed legislation is expected to strengthen the government's integrated, result-based management framework by performance management from an administrative system to one backed by law. Speaking during the high-level Forum on Public Sector Reforms and Transformation tripartite workshop in Kadoma last week, Dr. Rushwaya said the government had already made significant progress in institutionalizing a performance management culture This follows the introduction of performance contract for senior public officials in 2021. However, he said the next phase of reforms required a robust legal framework to broaden the scope of performance contracting, strengthen accountability, and ensure sustained improvements in public sector performance. To sustain these gains, there is a need to broaden the coverage of performance contract, strengthen accountability for non-performance, and support the system through the promulgation of an appropriate legislative framework. He said, in this regard, the proposed government performance and results bill is expected to reinforce results-based management. The proposed law, he added, will provide legal recognition for performance contracts, clearly defined institutional roles and responsibilities in line with integrated result-based management principles, requiring periodic reporting and independent evaluations, and introduce enforcement measures against non-performance. A Government Performance and Results Act will provide the following: give legal effect to performance contracting, clarifying institutional roles and responsibilities guided by the integrated results-based management principles, mandate periodic reporting and independent evaluations, and establish enforcement mechanisms for non-performance. At present, cabinet ministers, permanent secretaries, and heads of government agencies already signed annual performance contracts with the president. These set out targets they are expected to achieve during the year. However, these contracts are largely administrative instruments, with their authority deriving from executive policy rather than an act of parliament. It is envisaged that under the proposed law, performance contracts would have statutory backing. Every ministry, department, and agency would be legally required to prepare, implement, and report against agreed performance targets. The law would also prescribe how contracts are developed, monitored, and reviewed. The practical effect of the proposed law is that performance contracts would no longer be optional management tools, but legal instruments that every public institution must comply with. Furthermore, instead of reporting only at the end of the year, ministries would likely be required by law to submit regular performance reports, perhaps quarterly or biannually, to the Office of the President and Cabinet and other oversight bodies. These reports would measure progress against agreed targets using predefined indicators. This way, the government would be able to identify implementation problems much earlier instead of waiting until projects have failed. The bill also proposed independent evaluations, meaning assessments conducted by entities outside the institution being evaluated. These could include the Office of the President and Cabinet, the Public Service Commission, external auditors, independent evaluators, or other authorized bodies. These evaluations would determine whether reported achievements are accurate or whether programs are delivering the intended outcomes. It is believed that this would introduce an additional layer of accountability by reducing the risk of ministries overstating their achievements. The establishment of enforcement mechanism for non-performance will arguably be the most significant aspect of the proposed legislation. At present, performance contracts rely largely on administrative oversight. The bill proposes legal enforcement for persistent failure to meet agreed targets. While Dr. Rushoya did not specify what these enforcement mechanisms would be, the law is expected to establish a formal framework for dealing with non-performance once its provisions are enacted. In essence, the proposed bill will ensure that government institutions are judged not by the activities they undertake, but by measurable results they deliver. Dr. Rushwaya said the independent evaluation of the performance contracting during the National Development Strategy NDS1 cycle had confirmed its effectiveness and provided lessons that would strengthen implementation under NDS2. The proposed legislation forms part of broader public sector reforms that the government believes are necessary to improve policy implementation and service delivery, better policy coordination. Dr. Rushwaya acknowledged that despite notable progress, public institutions continued to face challenges, including overlapping mandates, duplication of responsibilities, weak coordination, resource misallocation, and conflicting policy positions amongst ministries. He said these institutional weaknesses had at times undermined policy implementation and created confusion for business and the public. It is the president's prerogative to assign the administration of acts to ministers in line with section 1041 of the Constitution. He said, however, as societal needs and expectations evolve, new demands emerge which may seem to obliterate the clear lines of intervention as stated in the various pieces of legislation, resultingly duplications and overlapping mandates leading to misallocation of resources, poor coordination, and turf wars have been noted. To address these allegations, Dr. Rushwaya said government intended to strengthen policy coordination through the Office of the President and Cabinet, the Public Service Commission, and the Ministry of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion. He said the government is also pursuing a series of complementary reforms designed to improve public sector efficiency. These include developing an integrated government delivery dashboard to monitor implementation of national programs in real time, establishing a citizen engagement platform through which the public will assess the performance of ministries and other government agencies, introducing governance scorecards informed by citizen feedback, and creating an early warning and rapid response system to identify and address service delivery bottlenecks before they escalate. The government also plans to expand digital transformation across the public sector through interoperable e-government systems, online public service, and data-driven decision-making, while promoting joint performance contracts among ministries to improve coordination and eliminate duplication. Dr. Rushwaya said these reforms were intended to ensure that government institutions focused on measurable outcomes rather than simple complementing activities, enabling the public sector to deliver tangible improvements in citizens' life. Now, you would understand that each and every policy that Emmerson Mnangagwa frames to target those not loyal to him, it has never been about performance in ZANU-PF since 1980. And Emmerson Mnangagwa has never been serious about, in fact, there is no need for this bill. There is sufficient legislation in Zimbabwe to ensure that issues of performance are properly tackled in Zimbabwe. But they haven't been the case. There is no legal instrument that may actually improve without that can improve actually efficiency in government. Without political will. This is all designed to target those not loyal to Mnangagwa and to target also retired General Chiwenga. Ministers would be made to actually sign these performance-based contracts. Afterwards, you may be given unreasonable performance, in fact, unreasonable task, and also insufficient budget just to trap you. And when you don't meet the targets that you are actually aligned with your contracts, then it's easier for them to fire you. They will say they did so based on non-performance. and it may appear to be easier, but we haven't seen Emerson Mnangagwa using these so-called performance contracts so far to get rid of people. Even if I mean, there have been reasons, but it hasn't been made public. You just hear the minister has been fired, and then the reasons will always be speculated. Thank you very much for watching us. If you are watching us for the very first time, please do remember to press the red or black subscribe button so that next time when we beam live, you become the very first one to watch us. You can financially support this channel by pressing the join button and be part of our members who are the heartbeat of this channel. Okancuba Mhlabane is signing off. Let me love and leave you. Let's meet on the other side of the